Yo, Joe. Talking comics, here's your host. It's A Real American Brian.
Hello, YouTube. I am back. It's A Real American Brian, and I brought my friend Scott on to talk about G.I. Joe, believe it or not. Scott, how's it going?
It is going great. I cannot believe we're sitting here as older adults still talking about G.I. Joe, but it's obviously the toy and property is going to probably definitely last longer than us in this planet.
I mean, it started before us and it will last beyond us. I mean, it's something that my dad was into, with the 12-inch line, and obviously I think A Real American Hero was much better, but
right. I remember my father when I did the transition from G.I. Joe, because they had movable elbows from Star Wars figures to G.I. Joe, and he's like, that's not real G.I. Joe.
Yeah, but I wanted to have you on. Issue 300 came out, and I thought that would be a good time to kind of celebrate the property in general and bring on I have a couple different people planned that I want to do this with, and just kind of bring them on and talk about our story with G.I. Joe, and maybe issue 300 if we get into that, but some other stuff. So I wanted to start off with how long have you been reading the comic book?
So G.I. Joe has a special love for me, not only because I was a little boy who loved the toys, but it probably, I always say that comics saved my life in some ways, and maybe that's being a little bit over dramatic, but I was growing up, I was terrible at reading comprehension, reading anything. I was the kid that was afraid to read in class. I always had to go to the bathroom right before it was my turn to read out loud to try to get out of it. And I remember I started the commercial for G.I. Joe 51 showed, with that little animation. It was just really cool. And I was at a 7-Eleven and I talked my grandfather into buying it for me. And I had no intent of, reading it. And I actually had the comic for several weeks, drawing characters out of it, because I liked to draw back then and stuff like that. And I remember I stayed the night at my grandmother's house, and she fell asleep early. She usually was like a night owl kind of grandma. So but she fell asleep fairly early, and I was kind of bored. And I thought maybe I should read this comic. And no joke, it probably took me close to an hour to hour and 20 minutes. Now I know comics back in the 80s were more wordier than a lot of them are now, but still that was a struggle to read that. And I was so proud I read a book and and I thought it was actually really cool. And that led to a few months later, I met a buddy who also read G.I. Joe comics, and he also drew and stuff at school. So we're still friends to this day. So, 1986, September is when I first started reading G.I. Joe. I somehow at the gas stations and stuff, because I didn't know that there was comic stores, I missed issue 52. And then I was heavy starting to read comics, mainly just G.I. Joe and Transformer comics at issue 53.
Awesome. And you've continued on through present day?
Well, so my buddy, I remember him telling me specifically about other comics, and that he was hearing rumors that G.I. Joe might get canceled. And I said, what the hell are you talking about? What do you mean canceled? And he goes, oh yeah, when comics don't make good sales, they cancel them. And I was like, this was all foreign to me. And of course I was just learning about comics and everything else. So at that point I started kind of branching out. I remember there's a TG&Y store in our town that had packs of comics that I'm sure was $1.99, but you got 5 comics and stuff like that. And so I thought, oh no, my favorite comics are going to get canceled. I better start branching out. And I branched out to X Factor, and then started some of the other X books and Avengers. And actually it kind of, probably as I was in junior high and stuff, I started kind of moving away from G.I. Joe, the comics. And then I got right back into it in 1990. Issue 100, I saw at a gas station when I was filling up my car, and I had a couple extra bucks, and I went ahead and bought issue 100 and fell right back in love. And it was kind of that moment where, you think you're too old for toys, or you don't want to hear people giving you a hard time about it. And I got right back into it. So,
yeah, that's crazy.
So I 100% have read every issue from issue 100 through, and probably, if I'm really honest with you, probably about 70% of the first 100 issues, because there's some some like 10 issue streaks that like I haven't touched, and that's like in the 70s and 80s for sure. I have them, I just haven't read them.
So a lot of that issue like 100 through like 154, there were a lot of people point to that as like the downtime of GI Joe and how like everything's going away with like Ninja Force and some of the crazy stuff. Which
Ninja Force and Transformers and those issues.
There was a lot of like rough stuff during there, but at the same time, I could still look at that and find like gems that I still enjoy. Like,
oh, there's still some really good issues, and then there was some bad times, and I just was like, for nostalgic reasons, even though it's weird to say that when you're like 18 or 19 or 20, like I still continued to buy them. I just thought, you know what, it's $1.50. I can do this for the little kid in me, and I'll just learn to love it. So
yeah. So when IDW started up the license again, did you immediately start picking up those issues?
100%. So you know how I got restarted with Image. I bought some of those, but when IDW took over and they said it's going to be a real American hero, it's going to continue on the numbers, I was sold. It didn't matter. I mean, and Larry Hama writing it, how can you not? Like, I mean, GI Joe is Larry Hama, right?
Right. Yeah. So do you have a favorite story arc or stories in general?
So some of the stories that stick out to me, and again, I remember, you know, when you first start collecting comics, you go to the comic store with $3 and you look through the back issue bins and you don't buy issue. I feel like today's person seems to worry about reading everything in order, when back when I was younger, if we got an issue, we just read it. Didn't matter if it was out of order or not.
But it used to be like, how much can I get for a quarter? Like I go through the quarter box. Oh, I can get 10 comics, or I can get this one over here for, I'm going with the 10.
100% quantity over quality for sure. Issue GI Joe number 48. I remember my grandmother, once again, we traveled a lot, so when we'd go on these camping trips all summer and stuff, you know, I would grab the phone book and we're in Iowa City, and I'd look through there and find some comic stores, and she was great about taking me places. And I remember GI Joe 48, which I had no idea was the first appearance of Sergeant Slaughter into the GI Joe comics.
Yes.
Loved that issue. And that's quite honestly, I don't reread a lot of comics. that is one I've read several times, and just it still has whatever goofy magic of, you know, Zartan trying to fool Slaughter the whole time, and it always, you know, I also love Zartan, so like it just fit everything, and it made me actually enjoy Sergeant Slaughter as a character on GI Joe, because I was at that weird age where I don't want real people in GI Joe, and I was also the guy mad about I don't want the fridge around or Rocky Balboa and stuff like this. But it made me actually go, you know what, Sergeant Slaughter belongs here. So
I came into the Real American Hero a little bit later than a lot of people. So Sarge was like a big deal for me, like that. And I know, like with my toys and stuff, Sarge was always the guy that led my Joes. Like I didn't care about Duke or Hawk. Like Sarge was my leader.
So you were the lucky kid that had a Sergeant Slaughter figure.
I had two. I had the mail away, and then I had the one that came with the triple T.
That's awesome. I don't know. I don't know why I never got Sergeant Slaughter. Maybe because my parents thought I was getting too old or something. I'm a few years older than you, so like, you know, you go through that phase where like you don't need those toys anymore. And here I am, you know, 48, and my dad just cracks up like, I thought you grow out of that stuff. And I was like, no, man. Other issues that stick out, of course, GI Joe 51 always has a place in my heart as the issue that I feel like kind of got me into reading, and it's just crazy to think about that. So that one's always going to be special. I love that old cover too. It's just magical to me. GI Joe 109, where the Saw Viper, you know, where they kill off some Joes. And I mean, me buying issue 100 and starting buying it, when I hit that issue, I thought, holy moly, they're gonna just start people they don't need, they're gonna start killing them off. This is gonna happen. I remember, and of course there's GI Joe 21 is like everybody's favorite issue in some ways, because it was so unique, you know, for the time. And I just remember a friend telling me like there's no words in it, and of course me being a slow reader, I was like, I'm down to read this then, you know.
Yeah, that issue 109 is so like shocking, because you would expect like, okay, so there's gonna be a death, there's gonna be like one or two deaths, and it was like buckets of deaths. Like,
yeah.
Cow.
I mean, yeah, that guy was amazing. So that might be one of my, you can't complain, but at the same, like, I kind of wish more permanent things like that happened more often, especially when I was younger. I think now I don't care as much. It's like, it's GI Joe, they're all going to be okay.
Yeah.
So
Do you have some stuff you brought for show and tell?
I did. So first off, lately I've been seeing these, the bigger figures that are coming out everywhere.
Okay.
So I had a chance to get one of these at like a Comic-Con I went to last year. And of course, I didn't want to pay $30 at the time because I saw them at another booth for 20, but I didn't pull the trigger fast enough. And then here I was coming back from a Blood Bowl trip from Kansas City, and we stopped in a store that had tons of action figures, and they had one, and I ended up paying 30 for it so I could get it. I'm trying not to get these. I don't know if you buy a lot of these, but like, they're so tempting. And as an adult, I want to open every package and pose them. And then after I do that, I'm mad that I opened it and posed them, because it's like, what am I going to do with it now? Because I'm not going to play with them. But
I have shelves of them back here.
I see that. Wonderful stuff. I've seen you go through your collection, but these will at some point get cracked open. I love the old classic Bat. It was one of my favorite toys. And it was one my family just didn't understand. I was like, I'll take 100 of them for Christmas. And they got me one. And I was like, no, really, I'm okay with it. And they're like, you already have that guy. And probably because I was buying the Bat and I saw these guys, and I know I just bought the same figure twice as the Tomax and Zaymot. All they did is they're the same guy, but I just couldn't resist. These were reliving my childhood because I never got the twins either as action figures. I wanted them so bad.
My big complaint about the classified version of those is that they weren't a 2-pack. Like, who out there is just looking for one? Like, I just want Tomax.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Zaybat's my favorite guy. Yeah. That it definitely should have been a 2-pack for sure. But the store we were at had those. And of course, the only figure I had before that was Major Blood, and I got him like super discounted. And I've always been like a weird Major Blood fan. Like, I wish they would do more with him in the comics, but at the same time, he's Major Blood. So another like cool little items here. I just got this recently graded. I had been going through some of my comics with some of the guys from the local comic shop who I was like, I got some things. Well, I had this. This is old, obviously, but here's my GI Joe. It's got 9.2 out of my old collection. So I was really shocked it came back that high.
Yeah, that's really nice.
It was one of the items where they're like, I think you can maybe get a 9. Do you sure you want to send it in? And I was like, I want to send this in no matter what. Even if it comes back a 7, it's going to make me happy. So it came out at 9.2. So I was really happy with that. So I'm kind of torn on these two, Brian, because it's like, they're cool to be graded, but at the same time, like, I like smelling the paper and going through them. But I think that's just the old man in me. Not recently. I should say a couple years ago in a Blood Bowl tournament, I picked this up, and I couldn't believe I found this, and I shouldn't have even bought it. But for you Joe people out there, do you see these are party hats?
Nice. Yeah.
A package of party hats with Sergeant Slaughter on them. There are 8 unique hats, and it was at like a little thrift store and stuff. And I was just like, I even told the girlfriend, I was like, I don't need these at all, but I'm going to buy them. And she said, buy what you love. And I said, okay. I really planned at one point to maybe like have a little goofy birthday party for myself and make everybody wear these, but they've sat in the package, and maybe one day I'll make $1 million off of them. And then last but not least, for a little show and tell, because I could go through my whole GI Joe everything. About 3 years ago at a local little Comic-Con, it was one-day Comic-Con thing. I wandered across a guy who had some old board games, and I'm proud to say that I found this big boy.
Nice.
It looks like 100% all the pieces are in there. I just really want to go get some old classic Joes, because it has the cardboard cutouts, but you can put your actual Joes on this thing. And I don't know if you can see like the details, but
that's pretty cool.
Play a little ballet,
rain and stuff there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, like, who knows if it's fun, but it's GI Joe.
Right.
This reminded me of the old GI Joe train set. I don't know if you were aware. I'm sure you're aware, but I don't know if you had one.
No, I never had one. I've seen it since. But...
Strangely enough, that was one of those weird toys that I'd get out every now and then, and I'd play with it for weeks, and then I put it back up. It was like playing Cool Army Men, because you had the blue Cobra soldiers and then you had the GI Joe guys. So yeah, that's a couple of little things from my GI Joe hoarding that I do.
Right on. So you were reading the IDW comics, which I always want to put more of a focus on, because I don't think enough people were reading these comics like throughout the whole run from 155.5 up to 300. Did you ever get frustrated and think about stopping purchasing the book, or was it just always like you were on board with it?
100% I wasn't. As long as Larry Hama was writing it, I was down to read GI Joe. There was times like I got tired of the the Blue Ninja robots and stuff like that. To me, that's very worn out, but at the same time, it's it's an android, so you can go smash one of those and cut its head off, and nobody's gonna complain or anything like that. So I get their purpose. But I am very tired of them around the cyborgs and stuff like that. But overall, I think there's been really good stories, and I think really, if you look at a percentage of, like, you take that last 150 issues and you take the first 150 issues, there's better issues in that last 150 for sure than that first half.
I absolutely agree. And I know that's not the common opinion. I think most people on the internet want to hate everything from the IDW area and label it whatever,
really,
put their own image on it. But yeah, I just think so many people are missing out. And you talked about subscription, or like purchasing numbers being low and getting the book canceled. Like throughout the last 100+ issues, the numbers have been so low on GI Joe, like it had no right to be printed anymore. Like the only reason it was still printed is because they were paying for the property. Like,
I mean,
nuts.
I don't know about those numbers, but we always talked about, like, it's amazing, like, because we ordered 2 copies from my shop, and even the store owners, like, there's a lot of people our age. I figured this book would sell more, and it's Larry Hama writing it, and
yeah, it's so weird. Like, I'm not sure what it would take for people to give it like a real chance. Like, so many people like have their own like preconceived notions, I think, when they go into this book, and just want to hate it to begin with and then find things to back that up.
Well, if I could complain about anything, is, and don't hate me, people out there, is we get Snake Eyes, Snake Eyes, Snake Eyes, Snake Eyes, Snake Eyes, and I love Snake Eyes, but man, I want to see some of these other smaller characters that we don't get to see often. And granted, they probably do a lot of Snake Eyes stuff to spike the sales as much as they can, because every little fanboy who claims they like GI Joe, their favorite character was Snake Eyes. So,
well, and you can go back to the end of the Marvel run where they put Snake Eyes as the title.
right.
Snake Eyes with GI Joe.
What was it? Snake Eyes featuring GI Joe, or something like that, or something like that. But yes, it was front and center, so try to get more sales off the book. And
so how do you feel about some of the new characters that have come in, I guess, kind of towards the later half of the IDW run? The first half, it wasn't really introducing too many new characters, but so like Dawn and Helix and Sherlock and characters like that.
I actually almost have no problem with them. I feel like they've kind of just fit in. I think they're like integrated them and introduced them very well. Even going to the, now the Dawn thing, like, I get it. We have girl Snake Eyes now, and we have the second Snake Eyes with Sean. They work in the GI Joe thing. Would I have liked 20, 25, 30 issues, no Snake Eyes, just to let other characters breathe? Sure, but I'm not going to nitpick that. I mean, GI Joe's like a fun pleasure anymore for me. I enjoy it. I'm not gonna read GI Joe versus Cobra. I'm gonna read GI Joe, A Real American Hero, till the day I die, or they stop publishing either one. And I assume that book's only gonna stay around as long as Larry Hama's around.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when Devils do have the license, they try to like continue on the story without Larry. And now, since we've retconned that and taken that out, that's no longer canon because Larry came back. But
those first 20 issues of the Image Devils Do stuff was actually not bad stuff for making it a part of it without making it a part of it and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So
So just a little spoiler warning for anyone that hasn't read up to 300. We're going to talk a little bit about those like 295 through 300 for a second here. So you've been warned. But I wanted to ask your opinion on like that story, like leading up. We knew 300 was coming and it was going to be the end of IDW. So like 295-ish through 300, the direction the story was going. Did you have any predictions before you got to 300 on how things would end up?
we going full spoiler at this point? We can talk about everything.
Yep, we gave them a warning.
Okay. I didn't really think we were going to get like 100% or as close as we could of Genghis Khan. I still thought it was just another Serpentor and not Serpentor Khan. I'm Genghis Khan, but I'm going to also be Serpentor. That kind of threw me for just a little bit. And I have no idea why I never, ever, ever thought that Snake Eyes was just going to crack out of one of those things and fully clothed and ready to go. But it was like the most obvious thing. And yet I didn't think we were going to get that. I didn't think we were going to get the return of Snake Eyes.
Well, I mean, like pulling him out of a freezer like that kind of annoyed me a little bit because it's like, so why did we have Snake Hunt? Like, why did they need Snake Eyes body? And again, at the casino, why did we need Snake Eyes body if you just have him over there in a freezer? Like,
Yeah,
just pick them up.
exactly. That and I'm exhausted personally. Like, I like Dr. Mindbender as a goofy mad scientist character, but I hope the next direction we go, they like write him out for a long time. I'm ready to see some of those other like classic Cobra villains, you know, Firefly, Scrap Iron, somebody else that we can talk about. And at this point, if you're going to bring back Snake Eyes, why couldn't you bring back Dr. Venom and just have him crack out of one of these things? And I don't know.
Well, I mean, he was brought back as like his cyber self, I guess.
Well, that's true. I mean, but you can give him flesh and bone again if you wanted to. But
so I really thought like the obvious path it was going to go leading up to it was that Sean and Dawn would end up in the brainwave scanner and they would pull the memories out of Dawn and put them into Sean. And then we would have like our 100% Snake Eyes.
Complete Snake Eyes. Yeah.
I thought that was the obvious path. I didn't want it to go that way because I really like Dawn a lot. She's one of my favorite characters. And I think there's a lot more to explore there that hasn't been. I wasn't super thrilled with pulling out another Snake Eyes, but I held out hope that maybe he would be Cobra Snake Eyes. Maybe have like a red suit and be like bad guy Snake. But
I mean, maybe that could still happen, but I doubt it. Yeah. I immediately after I read issue 300, and you know, up until just not too long ago, I didn't realize that the series was going to continue at another publisher, and you might even know who the publisher is going to be because you know,
nothing official has been announced. Like everyone suspects it's Skybound, but nothing official.
Oh, okay. But you know, obviously we got news that it was going to continue on in some form, and I was thinking of those G.I. Joe issues that you mentioned where it said talked about Ninja Force and Snake Eyes on the cover, because now we can just have the Snake Eyes trio. And, you know.
It's crazy. Like, and I don't know, like I don't like Sean at all. So I kind of wish that he would go away. But I'm a big Dawn fan, but I want her to be separate from like being Snake Eyes, like just
be her own self.
Dawn as a character,
not she Snake Eyes.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, they could have let up and killed off Sean before they, you know, I don't know.
Well, and it's so weird because I know, like, so leading up to it, Larry had done some interviews where he's like, you know, I'm not gonna do anything drastic that's going to affect anyone else taking the title on after me, because I think at that point in time he didn't know he was going to continue writing. So he wanted to make sure that door was open and like presented them, which is honorable. You know, you don't go out and kill all the Joes and be like, good luck, how are you going to bring them back to life? But at the same time, I think there could have been some finality to it. Like, I don't understand how, like, I think Wade Collins dying would have been A-okay. Like,
yeah, for sure.
We don't need Wade, and that would have been a cool story element to add some depth to Sean as a character.
I mean, the CG Laura, she could have sacrificed herself in some way or done something.
I think there's a lot of promise there for like her character continuing on too. I think that could be interesting. But I'm also kind of like, it's becoming tropes, right? So we have like the Snake Eyes trope of there's always going to be more Snake Eyes. Then the big one being probably the brainwave scanner is constantly back. Like we're using it to do something.
Yeah.
And then like a smaller one is always like we have these Cobra troopers that end up becoming good guys and just joining the Joes.
Right.
Okay. Like how many times can this happen? Where's the, like, the background checks here? Just...
and it's usually pretty immediate, right? They're like, okay, we'll just let you come on aboard. I would really love in the future, and we're not going to see this because Cobra Commander is one of my favorite characters, but the way I want Cobra Commander to be is not how I want some really strong, crazy moments from Cobra Commander, and we don't get them enough to me. So like, that's just how he is. I've accepted it, but man, I would love some kind of evil, mean Cobra Commander, not car salesman Cobra Commander.
I do like the Serpentor Khan, like as another, like having like branches of different evil factions, like instead of just focusing on Cobra Commander, like having Serpentor maybe lead his forces, and Destro didn't appear in this whole last story arc, which
that's
is
true.
Cool. Like he can still do his own thing, and I like that guy.
Well,
the original Cobra Civil War is one of my favorite story arcs, where it was like the multi-headed evil monster that the Joes were fighting.
The issue itself, as I read it, I don't know your opinion, but like I read it as like you said, we're going to wrap everything up, and even if it is going to go to 301, it's just going to be for a new company, and that we're going to get brand new story arcs. So as I was reading, I gotta admit, I felt like I was like reading a pro wrestling match where I start to believe like the guy who can't win the championship, all of a sudden it was storytelling so good that it was. And I thought they were gonna maybe kill off a character like Wild Bill or something as the plane starts going down. And I was actually mad and taken when I flipped the page and it's like to be continued. And I was like, what? This is 300. Let's wrap this up because now I'm into it,
Right. So let's talk about that a little bit more, like actually reviewing this particular issue. One of the things that, I was with all the previews and stuff that came out, they were like, okay, this is going to be an oversized issue. They didn't say double size, just oversized, which, okay, I don't know how many extra pages that is, but I'm down for it. Like it should be oversized. But then I get it and I'm reading it and like, so I have the cover gallery in the back. Like, I don't need that. Like I've seen these covers plastered on the internet for months.
Right.
And then we have that, what was it, like Stop the Bleed comic strip? That was like, I felt like I got robbed out of all the extra pages you put into this book. Like,
right. I actually felt a little like, I really thought that issue was really good. Even better than maybe some of the other ones leading up. And maybe it was just the thrill of me reading 300 and thinking we're going to get a complete end to this like chapter of G.I. Joe. So like I was reading it really excited. And then, so when it kind of tapered off and to be continued with a cliffhanger, I was a little pissed off. And then when I get those extra pages, the Stop the Bleed thing, which has to be a holdover from like we had this little story from the G.I. Joe Saturday Morning Adventure book that they came out with. It was like 4 issues. That's where I think that came from. Now I could be wrong.
And it would be much
it's written by the same writer. Yeah, for sure.
I would have been like, so I'm okay with like having a cliffhanger, but having like 4 big cliffhangers.
I mean, we didn't really wrap up anything, did we? I
mean, everyone's in danger, but no one, like, show me how dangerous it is by giving me like a death. I think would have been nice, even if it was somebody like Wade Collins.
Exactly. I mean, I guess the kind of big reveal is that Snake Eyes is back, obviously, and his face is not scarred up for once, and so he can speak.
Yeah, he can speak, and he looks like he did before the accident, and that'll be interesting, I guess. But
that's interesting, I guess. But I was going to make a point about something, and now I just totally lost it here. Oh, Dr. Mindbender is always messing with this brainwave scanner, and yet every Joe, they see something on the wall and they go, oh, a smiley face. That reminded me of CoverGirl. And they blink out of it like it's no problem. Like you think at some point they would go like, we're not letting you do this until you can really perfect this. We're going to start
I really liked when Serpentor called him out on that too. He's like, "So you have Snake Eyes under control?" It's like, "Oh yeah, I programmed him to be Cobra Lord." Like, "Oh, the same way you did me."
It's me. It's like, yeah. It would, if they're continuing, I'd love to see, like, again, I would love to see Dr. Mindbender written out of it to get rid of that trope for a while, as you say, with the brainwave device. And I would love to see some just older classic. I'd love to see the return of, like, the Dreadnoughts or something like that. But I'm ready to see some different villains, and I don't mind the new Joes at all. I think it's kind of cool that he integrated some new people in there and gave us some fresh origin stories and stuff like that. But also there's other Joes that, like, totally almost never see the light of day, and maybe he's not allowed to either with the licensing. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think he really has any limits. I think he just has like his roster that he really likes, and that's the ones that he goes to first. But I think there's something to be said for not just in the G.I. Joe book, but I think in like the X-Men books and other stuff too, like having a cast rollover. Like I think it was Chris Claremont at one point. What he really wanted to do with X-Men books was have like the characters age out and become professors at the school, and then bring in like the next generation. And I think there's something for that. Like, and G.I. Joe needs that. The new characters are needed, but we need to like make some room for them by getting rid of some of the other guys too, and maybe have
one
a
of those
timeline that actually makes sense would be nice.
right. I remember, I don't know which issue of G.I. Joe it was in, maybe 61, 59, somewhere in that area, where the character Grunt, he retired and went home, and they still kind of gave a little storyline with that. And at the time I thought, God, why don't they do this with a lot of characters? Just let them go have some peace. But I've always said that with the X-Men too. It's like, why can't Scott Summers go away for about 8 years and him really not do anything when he goes on vacation? Like, he doesn't have to fight somebody evil and stuff like that. So
yeah, I think there's a lot to that. But I mean, so I think we kind of poked at some of our ideas, but do you have any particular wants or desires out of the new publisher with 301 and going forward? I know Larry has said that he's already finished writing 301 and 302. So
I hope that they put a pretty decent artist on it, because I think, when people pick up the book, they'll flip through it, and if the art looks like trash, even though those guys could draw better than me, I think if they would really hire a really, maybe not a big name artist, but somebody who's at least known in the comic community, that might get some new eyes, especially for that fresh start, and maybe get some people back and realizing like what they've been missing and stuff. I know that's probably a dream, because like you said, sales are usually lower on this book, and so you can't put a top guy on.
But maybe if you brought somebody on for like the first 4 issues, I expect those first 4 issues are going to sell well. So
yeah, I would love to see them get somebody for a solid, like a 12-issue story like arc, and really have like a 12-issue story arc that it doesn't have to be super tight, but kind of a loose 12-issue story arc that we could get a nice trade and stuff like that. But I mean, as for the direction we go, I would like to write out the robots and just be done with that for a long time. I'll take bats all day long. I'm tired of the spider prime or whatever he's called. And
I was okay with it, and I was down for it, but then it got to be so much. Like, it just kept going. Like, if it was like a smaller story arc and then we just bring them up every once in a while, I think it'd be fine. But there was like such a big period of the book where it was Blue Ninjas, and
right,
it was a lot. So I would definitely see people's complain about that. But yeah, I'm excited for 301 and going forward.
Do we have any idea, like even date on that? I mean,
not yet,
because you're behind the scenes on a lot of more of these, probably like Reddit boards and stuff like that.
So the solicits for January and February are out, and there's no G.I. Joe listed. So we're probably looking at March at the earliest. I would suspect what's happening is they're building up like a 6-month kind of buffer, so they'd have those 6 issues done, and there's not going to be any delays.
I mean,
that's what
they could wait until Free Comic Book Day, like they did with issue, was it 155.5 or whatever?
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, initially, you always suspect when there's like this big changeover with the property going to a different publisher, there's going to be a gap. So kind of suspected that, but then when we heard Larry was working in 301 so early, I was like, oh, maybe there won't be, but it looks like there will be. So March at the earliest, probably, but we still don't know. We don't even have an official word on the publisher yet. They're still being respectful of IDW.
What is your thoughts on, and we talk about this all the time being old guys at the comic shop. What's your thoughts on the multiple different covers? Like, do you enjoy that type of thing? As a guy who picks up his comic books every week, I get anywhere from 8 to 15 books, which could get expensive very quick.
Yeah.
I like the multiple covers because I like art and stuff, and some of them look really cool. So some of them I will buy multiples of, and some I don't. But at the same time, I wish almost all comics would just go to one cover. It'd save me some money. So
what it's rare that I buy multiples now. In this last, like, leading up to 300, I have been buying multiples.
Same, exactly. Before I was always like, just give me a cover, whatever you think.
So usually what I would do is I would look through all of them and then pick out the one that was my favorite. Like, okay, that's going to be my issue. I'm going to get that cover. But leading up to this, I have been getting multiples and getting like the Connecting Jamie Sullivan covers is separate from the other book that I was getting to read. Right. Other stuff like that. I guess in general, like, I buy a lot of variant covers, not necessarily the ones that come out at the same time, but like if a convention later on will like have their own special cover, like I'm a sucker for those things. But yeah, any cool variant cover I buy a lot of. So I don't know. I'm a sucker for them, and they got me. So
well, I mean, when some of those multiple covers that was out in, like in the 280s and the early 290s, before I was getting them, I ran into not too long ago a little dollar box that had a bunch of stuff in there. Of course, I was like a knucklehead. I don't remember which cover I have. I'm just going to take both. And I got multiple issues of G.I. Joe that I never ever will need. That's for sure.
So I really dislike the comic book spectator market and that whole like specking type thing. But if you ever thought the G.I. Joe license was going to be a big boom again, like this IDW run where I talked about the sales numbers being so low, and then some of these ratio variants, like if you're only putting out 7,000 copies of the book to begin with, and then you have a 1-in-10 ratio, like there's not many of those books around. So
that's true.
Anything causes a spark in G.I. Joe and it becomes popular, those ratio books are going to be insanely valuable.
Well, you hope. I mean, I hope everything that, the day I die, I hope my kids don't sell my G.I. Joe collection for a grilled cheese sandwich. and that's part of the reason why I'm getting a few things every now and then graded. So they'll look at it and go, there might be some value. I don't expect them to get rich, but I don't, I'd rather them, get $300 than, $30 for a box of comics. Right. So
yeah, to a non-collector, having something in a slab, I think looks, there must be something to this. Like,
right.
You need to look into this. But yeah, I think that was a fun little conversation about G.I. Joe. I want to thank you for being on. Do you want to plug anything where other people can find you?
So if you maybe enjoyed my voice or my banter or anything else, yes, you can find me. I'm a co-host of a Blood Bowl podcast called Both Down. You can find me over at bothdown.com. We make sure to do a monthly podcast. It's very laid back, just like me and Brian here. We just sit and talk like two friends enjoying something we love. So if you're in the love of Blood Bowl and you want to learn strategy, don't listen to us. But if you want to learn the backstory and like the lore of Blood Bowl, so to speak, you can come and listen to me and Steve over at Both Down. And like I said, you can find us at bothdown.com. We're also on Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that. So
awesome. Well, thank you again for being on. And I will probably reach out to you and have you on again if you will.
Dude, anytime. And, I was really scared you were going to ask me questions that I wouldn't like remember the knowledge that, because you read some of these books 30 years ago and they don't stick out, but you see the cover and go, I liked it. And you said, what happened? And I'm not really sure,
but it was good.
But I liked it.
Yeah.
So anyways, well, thank you for having me on, Brian, and continue all your good work because you're doing a good thing. And
thanks.
These are just going to keep taking off, my friends.
Yeah, so. I hope so, but we'll see. It's been fun. It's just what I get most out of it is being able to share the hobby, because this was like collecting comics in general can be such a like solo hobby, or like especially when you limit it down to like G.I. Joe comics. Like there's not a lot of people in my life I could reach out to and be like, hey, you want to talk about G.I. Joe?
Right. And you're right about that. If you're getting enjoyment out of it as much as the person watching you, then I mean, in some ways, we don't like to get rich off YouTube, right? But I mean, that's not going to probably happen for most of us. But hey, if you're having fun, that's what matters. So
yeah, for sure.
So
yeah, so thank you for being on, and I'm pretty confident you'll be on again. We'll
awesome. Awesome. I appreciate you. You have a nice day.
All right, take it easy.
So long from Brian. Until next time, same Brian time, same Brian channel.